Is this Eric out there, man? At that point, Eric Clapton was the god of guitar, whose charms of the Beatles are one of the most important bands ever. Paul McCartney has worked with and been influenced by some of the best guitarists in rock history. The Beatles had their own legendary lead guitarist in George Harrison. It will take time and patience. McCartney has often talked about other players who had a lasting effect on him, from Eric Clapton's blues-infused mastery to Jimmy Page's raw energy. Music by Hendrix. Not only do McCartney's choices show technical brilliance, but they also show emotional depth and new ideas. Who are McCartney's 4 best guitarists? Let's look at his top picks and talk about what makes each one unique. Jimi Hendrix. Paul McCartney has never been afraid to talk about how much he admires Jimi Hendrix. In many interviews over the years, McCartney has not only talked about how much he admires Hendrix's incredible talent, but he has also gone so far as to call him the greatest guitarist of all time. This high praise isn't just based on nostalgia or the awe that often grows around legendary musicians. It comes from McCartney having seen Hendrix's brilliance for himself and having a deep understanding of what true artistic mastery means. McCartney's first meeting with Hendrix was one of those lucky events that seemed to change rock history. It took place in a small London club called the Bag of Nails, which was known for attracting famous musicians. At the time, Hendrix was still relatively unknown in the UK, but he went on stage in front of McCartney and other people in the audience. What started out as a normal night out quickly turned into an unforgettable experience as soon as Hendrix hit the first note. His electrifying presence filled the room, and his performance wasn't just about technical skill. It was an explosion of sound, emotion, and raw energy that left the audience spellbound. Hendrix's approach to the guitar was unlike anything McCartney or anyone else had ever seen. He didn't just play the instrument, he commanded it, bent it to his will, and turned it into an extension of his own being. He coaxed out sounds that had never been heard before, making the guitar wail, roar, and whisper with a soulful intensity. Not only could he play with unmatched speed and accuracy, but he also put emotion into every note, which made every show a deeply immersive experience. Just days after the Beatles released their groundbreaking record Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band in 1967, Hendrix put on one of the most memorable shows of his audacity and brilliance. It happened at the London Savile Theatre. When Hendrix took the stage, he shocked everyone by starting his set with a fiery version of the album's title track. It was an incredibly brave move. Hendrix not only learned the song in a few days, but he also made it his own. McCartney, who was in the audience that night, was amazed and deeply moved to hear a musician of Hendrix's caliber play Sgt. Pepper so fearlessly. It was proof of the music's wide-reaching impact, but it also meant something deeper. Hendrix wasn't just a musician who covered a famous song. He was an artist who could take any piece of music, change it in his own way, and make it better. McCartney's praise that night wasn't just flattery. It was an acknowledgement that Hendrix was setting a new standard for what could be done with the electric guitar. This moment summed up why McCartney holds Hendrix in such high regard. It wasn't just about skill or technique. Many musicians could play fast and learn hard riffs, but Hendrix had something more, an unfiltered connection to his instrument, the ability to channel pure emotion through his playing, and a fearless willingness to push musical boundaries. He felt music in every part of his life, not just playing it. By doing this, he changed what the guitar could be. McCartney's respect for Hendrix is still as strong today as it was when he first saw him perform. Over the years, he has often talked about Hendrix with awe, still inspired by the magic that Hendrix brought to the stage. He has told stories of Hendrix's willingness to try new things, his effortless ability to blend rock, blues, and psychedelia into something completely new, and his amazing stage presence that made every performance unforgettable. Even though Hendrix died too young, his impact on music is still felt today, and McCartney is sure that Jimi Hendrix was and always will be the best guitarist of all time. McCartney has never been limited by nostalgia. Instead, he has been open to new ideas and has praised the artists who have pushed the limits of musical expression. Eddie Van Halen stands out in McCartney's mind because of his groundbreaking approach to the guitar in the 1970s and 1980s. Van Halen changed the sound of rock music with his virtuosic technique and limitless creativity. What made Eddie Van Halen extraordinary wasn't just his technical prowess, his lightning-fast solos, intricate tapping technique, and explosive stage presence, but also his deeper understanding of the emotional nuances of music. Van Halen's ability to blend sheer power with moments of restraint struck a chord with McCartney, whose own songwriting philosophy values melody, feel, and dynamics over technical excess, in McCartney's view. McCartney thought Van Halen stood out because he knew when to show off his guitar skills and when to back off and let the music speak for itself. This subtle control, the balance between fire and finesse, was what made Van Halen stand out. This quality made me think of the great artists who knew that music isn't just about showing skill, it's about making people feel things. The Beatles were great examples of this principle because they wrote songs that were technically complex but always put melody and story first. McCartney and his bandmates also used space and silence in their music, like in Yesterday's melancholy lulls or Hey Jude's energizing builds. Van Halen's playing had the same instinct. He knew how to shape sound to enhance the song as a whole rather than overpower it. For example, on Eruption, he unleashed scorching leads, and on Panama and Jump, he used emotional melodic phrases. This love of balance is related to McCartney's admiration for musicians like Hendrix who change the way instruments are played while still keeping a deep link to the essence of songwriting. Van Halen wasn't just a technical master, he was also a real innovator whose contributions went beyond the fretboard. His work with tones, harmonics, and guitar modifications changed the course of rock music in the same way that the Beatles' groundbreaking studio techniques changed popular music. McCartney's admiration for Van Halen shows how he sees the history of rock music as a whole. Even though Van Halen is a legend from the 1960s, McCartney has never looked down on musicians from later generations, instead recognizing and celebrating their achievements. McCartney's respect for Van Halen shows that he understands rock music is a living art form that is always changing. It is this willingness to be open-minded that has helped him stay relevant over the years, allowing him to adapt and experiment while staying true to the basic rules of great songwriting. McCartney's praise of Eddie Van Halen shows that he still believes music is about more than just skill. It's about feeling emotion and knowing when to let the notes tell the story instead of just technique. In this way, both McCartney and Van Halen will always be remembered as musicians who truly understood the language of music, not just as masters of their instruments. David Gilmour is another great British rock star that Paul McCartney admires. Their shared musical tastes make this respect clear. The famous former Beatle has long said that he admires musicians who can make people feel deep emotions through their songs. They play their instruments, and Gilmour is a great example of this rare skill. In the 1980s, McCartney asked Gilmour to play a guitar solo on the song No More Lonely Nights from his 1984 soundtrack record, Give My Regards to Broadstreet. This was their first major collaboration. Gilmour's solo on the track is a perfect example of his artistry, soaring, expressive, and full of the kind of emotion that defines his best work. Over the years, McCartney and Gilmour's paths continued to cross, both on stage and in the studio. They respect and admire each other's approaches to music, and McCartney has called Gilmour a genius many times. Gilmour is not just brilliant because he is technically skilled, although that is obvious. He is also brilliant because he can use his guitar to express his feelings. It's not about speed or complexity in Gilmour's playing, it's about touch, feel, and the sheer expressive power of each note he plays. What makes Gilmour stand out in McCartney's eyes is his unique ability to communicate deep, often ineffable feelings through his instrument. There are a lot of highly skilled guitarists, but Gilmour is one of the best at making solos that sound like they are telling a story. His work with Pink Floyd, especially on songs like Comfortably Numb Time and Shine on You Crazy Diamond, shows that he can make a wide-ranging soundscape that goes beyond just musical skill. His solos aren't just extras on top of a song, they're an important part of the emotional experience of the music. Every note he plays seems carefully chosen and full of meaning and weight, which is very similar to McCartney's own musical philosophy. McCartney has always put melody and emotional connection over technical flashiness, and he sees Gilmour as a kindred spirit as a bassist. McCartney knows how important it is to be careful and use the right note at the right time instead of adding too many complicated parts to a piece. This philosophy is shown by Gilmour's guitar playing, which shows that a single extended note played with the right phrasing can be much more powerful than a bunch of quick scales, even when they work well together artistically. McCartney and Gilmour have shared the stage many times, which shows how much they respect each other. One of the most memorable times was when Gilmour joined McCartney for a special performance at the legendary Cavern Club in Liverpool, which is where the Beatles famously honed their craft in the early 1960s. The event was recorded and later released as Paul McCartney Live at the Cavern Club, which showed Gilmour's unique guitar playing with McCartney's live band, further solidifying their relationship. Gilmour and McCartney also played together at the concert for New York City in 2001. This event was held in response to the 9/11 attacks and showed how committed both musicians were to using their music for good causes. One reason McCartney admires Gilmour is that he can change his sound all the time without losing his unique emotional depth, even when he's not with Pink Floyd. Gilmour's solo career is characterized by introspective and atmospheric compositions, which McCartney, an artist who has successfully navigated multiple musical reinventions himself, must surely appreciate. Both musicians have changed over the years, but they have kept a core essence that makes their music instantly recognizable and deeply moving. In the large pantheon of British rock, Paul McCartney and David Gilmour stand out. McCartney changed popular music with the Beatles, and Gilmour pushed the boundaries of rock music with Pink Floyd. Their mutual respect shows the lasting power of music that puts emotion over technique. Whether they're working together or on their own, these two artists continue to inspire musicians and listeners alike. For McCartney-Gilmour, the guitar is the most expressive instrument, and the musician does more than just play notes. They breathe life into them, making sure they hit deep in the hearts of those who hear them. Eric Clapton. Ed Clapton was already famous in the rock and blues worlds long before Paul McCartney publicly praised him. By the time McCartney started promoting Clapton's work, the guitarist had already built a formidable reputation not only through his time with the Yardbirds and Cream, but also as a solo artist whose passionate and technically brilliant playing made him one of the most respected musicians of his generation. However, McCartney's praise for Clapton goes beyond just recognizing his early genius. What stands out most is McCartney's recognition of how Clapton has grown and improved over the years. Back in the late 1960s, Clapton was already a well-known figure in the British rock scene. Their paths officially crossed when George Harrison asked Clapton to play the lead guitar solo on While My Guitar Gently Weeps, a standout track on the Beatles' White Album. Harrison and Clapton had a deep friendship, and while the Beatles rarely had outside musicians on their recordings, Clapton's participation was an exception that showed how much Harrison admired his talent. Clapton's soaring, emotive solo became one of the most famous moments in the Beatles' discography, solidifying his place not only as a member of the Fab Four but also as someone who could hold his own among them.